And J. Frankie Hires, present, would like to speak as well. So if y'all would like to both come to the table.
Good afternoon. My name is Frankie Hires from Jefferson Parish. I'm traveling for, I believe, the 7th or 8th occasion on this effort. Principled representation, it might matter, right? That's why we end up here. I was just over at the other room speaking to this a bit. Jefferson Parish with 440,000 citizens, Baton Rouge with over 456,000 would have been the second, third largest states in this union when we first enumerated. And you don't have to wait 10 years. You have to do it within 10 years. Though in 1920 we failed at the federal level. Is there a union if you fail to do what you're obliged to do? Has a contract been nullified? I don't know. You don't want to address that here. But you don't have to wait 10 years to correct for this. That's for sure. The Constitution's clear about that. It's within 10 years that you must do this again. That being said, we've all sworn an oath to defend the Constitution, support the Constitution, the oath of affirmation, Article 6, right? I did as a census worker. When it comes to trying to deal with this issue of minorities, it's a floating thing, right? This is changing all the time. Black folk are going to double their population in the next predicted 20 years by the census figures. They'll go from 13 to 15% of the national population. The demographic is going to increase by the greatest margin, and trust, non-Hispanic white folk, right here, we're the only ones losing. We've topped out. We're opting in with the other races because 2 or more races are going to 400% growth. 400% growth for 2 or more races. What happens when one of those people decides to define themselves as black? What's going to happen to your apportionment then? Your districting then? You see, in questions of power, the distribution of power, as a Jeffersonian Republican, Thomas Jefferson said this: "Let no more be heard about a confidence in man." I don't want to have to count on you to do the right thing. I don't want to have to count on you to be fair or equitable or any other such idealistic notion. He said to bind them down from mischief by the chains of a constitution. But if we don't comprehend the document, or what the very fundamental words say, representatives and direct taxes, put a pin in the latter one because I'm sure none of you know what direct taxes are, but direct taxes and representatives are to be apportioned among the several states according to the respective numbers. And if you understand Article 4, Section 4, we're obliged that at the state level. We surrendered this in 1842. On June 25th, as a matter of fact, next Saturday, a week from tomorrow, will mark the 180th anniversary since John Tyler signed away principled representation and the work of the 27th Congress. So March 4th, 1843, when that 28th Congress is seated, you can no longer, constitutionally speaking, get much done. And what ends up happening, right? Secession, abolition, a costly civil war, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, Robert Barron's to prohibition, suffrage, prohibition's repeal. Y'all seen this pendulum? It's feeling like 1977 to me right now. We rationed gas back in 1970. Some of you might remember that. I was in California. Trust me, we knew about it, right? What makes up a minority and how we're going to resolve these things requires some considerations of the principles that guide for this. When that first bill was passed in 1792, narrowly by 1 seat in one chamber and 2 in the other, they had no principles at all for explaining the outcome. They came to just and tolerable results, could not be objected to from the North, from the South, from industrial to agrarian. And if it had been obtained by any means prescribed within the Constitution, it had been fine. Jefferson found that it had not because it provided for 2 ratios of representation. It's amazing how when I'm sitting in these special sessions, none of you, not one person, not the representatives, nobody wants to see their parish or their community dissected. But 55 plus parishes serve more than one master. The representative does at the state level. We've got no sense of what it means to have principled representation because it's been 180 years since we knew what it meant. Republican form. You're guaranteed it at the state level. That's why I've been to these meetings. You all are supposed to take a heads up on this. You're supposed to go look into it. I can't find anybody because nobody's coming to me and asking me afterwards. Polly won't come see me. She tried to redistrict me out of my district. That's the best y'all could do. It's just silly. So he goes on to say, if you permit the large fraction of one parish or one state to choose a representative for one of the smaller fractions in another state or another parish, you take from the latter its election. And this constitutes real representation and substitute a virtual representation of a disenfranchised fraction. And the tendency of the doctrine of virtual representation, anybody know what the doctrine of virtual representation refers to? Any of y'all? That's the Revolutionary War. No taxation without representation. But nobody knows what direct taxes are. Nobody knows what the principles of indirect taxation are. Jefferson Parish taxes West Bank 0.5% less for a hospitality industry than it does the East Bank. That defies the Constitution itself, but nobody knows what the document says. So y'all swear an oath, but it's become perfunctory. The apportion bill that actually did pass after the veto, the first veto, George Washington's veto, to ensure that we'd have a basic divisor, principles to prescribe for future apportionments. That bill reads as such: House of Representatives shall be composed of members elected agreeably to a ratio of one member for every, at the time, 33,000. You know what our ratio is today for this, what you're doing? 776,000 people each one of those reps has got to try and speak for. I don't care who's voting for them. They're not listening to anybody. They can't. How could they? The only people any of these 6 representatives are ever going to be able to listen to is the biggest employer. And I found out it's the federal government. Vernon Parish has the biggest employer, Polk Base, Army Base, right? That's the biggest employer in the state. And you know who the next biggest employer of the state is? The state! And this isn't a place where I live I'm a Republican. And I live in a socialized state, completely socialized. The 2 biggest employers are the federal government and the state government. Anybody care for free market capitalism? There's no such thing. The only way you get to a free market is I beat you over the head and take your stuff. And that's free, kind of, I guess. Point is that principle representation matters. I need you all to consider this. I need you to establish some principles to guide for future apportionments. Consider this greatly. You've sworn an oath to do it. You've sworn an oath to actually care about the things that I'm trying to get to you. I'd appreciate it if y'all would do something about it, more than give us lip service. Look, the minority here in Louisiana isn't black people. I said this over at the other room. This is your census report. 40-something parishes, right? 40-something parishes all lose in population. The rurals are the minority. The rurals are the minority. And they've held power, more power than they were entitled to, going back to probably the formation of the state, because they could. I don't fault a shark for being a shark. But at some point, you're going to run out of food, right? So you got to figure out how to give up some of the power from the north and the west that you've had, principally. So you got 6 representatives. How about this, right? Rurals that's the minority district. So let's set aside one district to just be rural parishes. And then go ahead and let East Baton Rouge be the home for one district, Jefferson be the home for a 2nd district, Orleans be the home for a 3rd district, and so on down to St. Tammany and Lafayette. Now, Cato Parish would make like a 3rd black district if it was the home. But I'm not asking you to overreach or to really consider that. But 5 parishes from East Baton Rouge, Jefferson, Orleans, St. Tammany, Lafayette with 221,000 plus should not be suffering virtual representation that we got away from in the Revolutionary War. You could do better. Jefferson said this: if we find the people lacking for the enlightenment required to exercise their discretion, exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, that is, if I find them lacking for the enlightenment required to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the solution would not be to take it from them. Not you. You're just a reflection of our neglect and opportunism, right? I'm not going to take the power from you. No, he says the solution is to inform their discretion. And that is a true corrective for constitutional abuses of power. You got to inform your discretion as to why. How we empower an office of trust has to begin to matter more to all of us than who holds it. Y'all are term limited. You're gone. Before I can find out what you did wrong, you're already on to your next gig. I appreciate the time. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mr. Hires. Mr. Yancey.
Wow. I really know now what it is to sit next to a Republican.
Come and visit this committee more often. You'll never know what you might have here.
And you know, first of all, my name is Checo Yancey. I work for Vote, and I'm a former incarcerated person. And I gained my voting rights a couple of years ago, and you know, trying to be a part of the community and do the right thing. But I tell you, wow. You know, I think we're here today because the federal judge said that we need 2 minority districts, and I was really shocked when the young man said white folks are losing, and I'm saying, wow, first time I heard that. But in history is, you know, sometimes it repeats itself.